I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hello, welcome to VLGA Connect. It's time for another in our very popular Local Leaders series, because this is where we get to know the people who are in the know in the sector. And today it's the Mayor of Kingston City Council for, let me just check my watch, maybe a week or two as we record this. Councillor Hardy Sab is my guest. Hello, Hardy.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Lovely to have you here and good to meet you finally. As I said, your mayoral term, it's almost over and done, isn't it?
It feels like a very long year.
Yeah.
I've loved it though. It's great.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Perhaps we'll get this one out of the way. Is there a chance that you might be going around again as mayor in the last year of the council term? Have you decided?
Potentially, but I think what we're going to do is give others the opportunity to run. We've got a lot of great councillors in our group that are really interested in giving back to their community. So I think it's all about giving the opportunity to others too. I do think a 12-month term is very short. It goes by very fast. Yes. I know we do it differently in Victoria, but maybe if I get elected again and there's an opportunity, I would love to jump at it.
So it sounds like you're definitely going to be putting your hand up again next year?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, well, that's good. That's definitive. So there you go. So we've got those questions out of the way. Let's take a step back or two, Hardy, and find out why you became involved in local government in the first place, because this is your first term as a councillor, isn't it? Let alone having the opportunity to be mayor during the term.
Yeah, that's right. First time as a councillor, first time as a mayor. It sounds like, when you call up a radio station, you say first time, long time.
First time caller.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look, it's a really funny story, actually. I've always been involved in volunteering and doing a lot of stuff in community spaces since I was about 14, 15, 16, around that sort of space. Through school, I used to volunteer at aged care spaces. I used to feed the homeless through school as well. And then when I was about 18, I got involved in my youth group and my religious youth group and continued doing a lot of volunteering there. And throughout uni, I got very heavily involved in clubs and societies and doing a lot of stuff in committee work, just always sort of keeping myself busy. In my last couple of years of uni, just because I had been so involved in uni life and everything like that, I got asked to run in student politics, having no real foundational understanding of what that meant, or politics in general, to be honest.
Yeah.
I studied software engineering, so you can imagine what that's like socially. But I said, you know what, I'll give it a go. And I was the first elected person of colour officer for the Monash University, which was really exciting. And I did that again my next year after as the executive rep and secretary. And then when I left uni, which is very oxymoronic to say, when I was working full time, I had all of this free time. Not really, but kind of. And I wanted to just get on a committee for my council. Like I just wanted to kind of continue doing some volunteering and give back. So I reached out to my local councillor and I sent him an email saying, how can I get on a committee? And he said, why don't we catch up for a coffee? And I said, okay, well, sure, happy to. And it was around the time, it was probably just a year out from when the council elections were. So it was just before their last statutory meeting, actually. And he, after talking, he said, you should, it sounds like you're really interested, you should consider running for council. That's our former mayor now. And I said, okay, well, that sounds interesting. What's involved in that? And he said, it's a meeting once a week. It's not much. And I thought, that's interesting. That's manageable. I can do that. And you're laughing and everyone who's listening probably knows it's obviously not just a meeting once a week. It's a lot more involved than that. So I put my hand up, and our council in Kingston was one of the councils that went to single member wards from multi-member wards. And we went from 9 councillors to 11 councillors.
Right.
And so with those changes and with just the way the election occurred, we had 6 out of the 11 councillors were new councillors, first-time councillors, a majority. So in my first year, I spoke to this newer group and I said, look, it seems like our community wants change. They want a fresh new perspective, fresh new looks. And so they supported me to be the deputy mayor in the first year. And before I asked if I could be supported to be the mayor in this previous term, I met with our former mayor, who was the same person who convinced me to run for council. And I said, look, what's involved in being the mayor? Can you please give me more of an idea? And he said, it's just a couple of more meetings a week. And I thought, oh, great. Okay, I can do that. And then I guess here I am now.
Now, this is a few things I want to pick up on there that you mentioned. This is Steve Stakos you're talking about,
It is,
of
yes,
course,
yes.
yeah, who's been, I think, 4 times mayor of
That's right,
Kingston.
the mayor
Yeah.
emeritus, yes.
Exactly. So, how significant or instrumental, I guess, was that first contact you had with Steve about the role of councillor to you actually deciding to put your hand up? Because a lot of councillors don't take their responsibility to foster the next group as seriously as that, if I might say.
I thought that was so valuable. And
Yeah.
like that has continued on and I kind of look at Steve and it's not official, but he kind of mentors me a little bit in understanding the role. And actually he does that same role. He's our most senior councillor and he plays that role for all of our new councillors and even for existing councillors who've been on for a while as our most senior in terms of longevity in council. So that's a really valuable part of what he provides. And I know councils, and we're going through this process now, and I've even been asked by another council to go speak to them about what's it like being a councillor to their community so that they can encourage some of their communities to run. And I know we do that, but that had never been on my radar before running. So to me, you know, without having that meeting and without sort of being spoken to about council and I have to admit, until I got into council, I didn't understand the breadth and depth of what
Yeah.
councils in general were involved in. But that having that connection, I think, was really important. So, you know, every time I get the chance, if someone's expressed to me that they're interested in what council does or wants to run, I find that that's a really important link to be able to actually, you know, give some of that knowledge, share some of that experience as well.
So many people say that they weren't prepared for the breadth and the scope of what local councils do. I wonder, have you got any thoughts on how we prepare people better for the role in that sense?
I think it's actually the role of the particular councils with really expressing what they do. We when I came in to being the mayor this year, I spoke to our comms team and I said, you know, we need to do some more information sharing with the community about what councils get involved in. And usually, you know, whenever people are engaged with what council does, it's only one aspect. It could just be like the, you know, the immunisations. It could be access care, like our aged care service provider. It could be childcare services. It could be the Meals on Wheels. But they only see the one piece of interaction that they have. So what we did, and I thought it would be a really good idea, and it seems to have been a real success in our community, was talk about the number of services, and we called the campaign 120 services in 120 days.
Yep.
And we actually do a lot more than 120 services, but it just sounds better to say 120 services in 120 days. And it was all about through a whole range of different mediums, different events, and all through the different channels that we've got to actually give people a look into the level and number of services that we provide to get a good idea of what the scope is, what we're involved in, the really like the minutiae, and then even the broader things, you know. So it was that was kind of what we did. I think that's the role that council, the organisation, needs to play.
So I also want to take you back. You're talking about being very active as a school student, community-wise. Where did that interest come from?
I don't know. I've always been a bit community-minded. I think my parents are very generous. They've immigrated here, and I think they really respect and really value having community connections. And we've got our religious community group that acts as our really big community that supports one another, and they've always been involved in that. So I think just by nurture and by the environment that I was in, it just made sense for me to do that sort of stuff. My siblings are similar, probably not to the same extent, but are similar. So I kind of guess what we've known.
So back then, was there also an interest in politics that went with that?
Oh no, I did not get. I only really started paying a close mind to politics probably in the 2019 federal campaign when I was, you know, pretty upset with everything that was going on. I started to pay attention a little bit more, I guess, also in the state election prior to that too, when they were talking about, you know, the Sudanese community groups and things like that. That kind of spurred my interest, but it didn't really start until the 2019 federal election when I got very upset with the outcome. And then everything that happened actually also in America with the rise of Trumpism and all that sort of stuff, that kind of got me really interested in what was going on in the space. And yeah, I mean, I know everyone always says this, but I wouldn't really say that I'm a politician or anything like that. I feel like I'm acutely aware now because of the environment around me, the role that politics play and how important it is.
So now that you've been a councillor and a mayor, are you thinking about a broader political role at some point in the future?
I mean, I'd love to. I'd love to for sure. I just see that as being able to give back to another scale and to another level, to not just represent my community. And I feel like representation is really important. And I've noticed that even now, just being on council, I've had a lot of people from the Druze community, which is my background, who have, messaged me and spoken to me and reached out about how they can get involved in stuff like this. And that kind of speaks volumes to me about representation. And even when I decided, this is really funny actually, even when I decided to run for council, my parents not really understanding was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that with your time? Come on, you can do better things with your time. But Steve Bracks, who was a premier of Victoria, it was a Lebanese premier. And so them, and my background being Lebanese Syrian, that kind of really allayed any of the concerns that they had about it. But that kind of got them thinking, oh, well, there's something a little bit more for you out there. And that kind of gave me inspiration too, to think, oh, maybe I actually can do something like this. Maybe I am worthy of giving back, or maybe I'm not, I'm good enough to do that. And I kind of like to express that to other people too, that you are really worth, if you've got a real passion for community, you've got a real care, then you should run for council and stuff like that. Yeah.
They say it's never too late to learn something new. I did not know about the Druze community until I knew I was going to be speaking to you, and I looked it up. So I've learned something there. And as you said, your parents are Lebanese and Syrian. Is it fair to suggest that some of those cultures have a distrust or a mistrust of authority, and does that extend to a cultural issue with trust of councils, of local government?
I mean, I think they don't see that, like, yes, I think that does extend to them. And I think that's probably a cultural thing because of, I guess, where they've come from and the issues that they've had to deal with and the ongoing issues that are still occurring, maybe in the countries that they come from, that they don't have trust for different levels of government. I don't think they necessarily, unless they're, especially if they're first generation or just moved here, I don't think they necessarily have a complete understanding, unless they've done it through their education system, which I never got that education really about the different levels of government growing up. But I don't think they see or understand the separation of what that means. My family now are, because of, it's like everything I talk about, are really understanding and are on top of it, and and it's kind of ripples out from there.
So I want to take you back to last year when you were elected, and read a couple of your quotes to you, and then I want to get you to school yourself. You said that your focus was going to be on improving transparency and community consultation, and that you plan to be an active and visible conduit between the community and the council, always championing community consultation. How do you think you've fared on that front?
I think we've done amazingly. I'm not going to give it a score. It's up to the community to say. But we in this past year, we created a deliberative engagement group. So we have 220 member representative panel with a 40, and within that 220, there's a 40 that are a bit more involved. That oftentimes they sometimes see policies and strategies before council gets to see them to provide feedback, which sometimes is a bit funny. But that is a way that we're not just talking deliberative engagement, we're actually getting them more involved in providing community-based feedback and community-based decision-making. We created a community reference group for a new pool that we're building, a really significant infrastructure project. And again, that's a representative sample of our community from all walks of life, accessibility, races, ethnicities, sexes, etc. That will make decisions on our pool. And again, they sometimes see things before council does, to be able to give their direct community feedback. They came up with that group that was helping design the pool came up with pillars that were the design concepts that they wanted the pool to hit. And that was then presented to council. We adopted that. We had our community, another one of our plans, our All Abilities plan, had an All Abilities dedicated community group again that was steering that. And at the moment, we're working through an MOU with another group to empower our community to talk about climate risk and adaptation and things like that. And that's a really interesting, innovative concept that I don't think has been done in Victoria, at least, but it's still early stages, so I can't really talk too much about it. But that is another way that we're actually trying to get our community to be at the core of the discussions and community, mindedness. So I don't know. I think that's a good scoring.
It sounds pretty good, and we might have got a little scoop there for VLGA Connect that we'll have to come back to when you've got more info. There's also, Hardy, I'm mindful, some pretty significant issues that have come up during your mayoral term that you've been front and foremost in talking about. I just want to get a couple of comments on these from you. Of course, the housing statement from the state, and Kingston's got a pretty well developed housing policy that you think sets you up pretty well for success here, don't you?
Yeah, look, so we've got the amendment C203 to our housing strategy. It was over 6 years in the making. We've been working on this housing strategy, culminated this year in my term as mayor. Was a very significant piece of work. It was one of the largest levels of consultations that we had done in council. We sent direct mail to every single home address, residential address, talking to them about the current residential zone that they're in, or zone that they're in, and the proposed change zone and what that means. So they had a direct comparison. That wasn't the only level of engagement. We had done over the past 6 years, multiple town halls completely filled with people to talk to them about those issues. And it's very rare, and you would get an understanding, and a lot of people who might be listening will get an understanding that it's very rare that the independent panel, when you present, your strategy to, very rare that they come back and actually support the council's position and what they're proposing. And we had, a very broad support for what we proposed to this board, with very little. There was only a few recommendations for changes that they had suggested, which we think is really promising. We've commented on a couple of those. We had over 600 submissions, or around 600 submissions from the community on the housing strategy. That just demonstrates how engaged people were on the process and knew what was going on. And what's really promising is we've been able to meet the needs of the density that we're about to see in Kingston, which we're looking to have another 30,000 people in 15 years, so till 2038. We're able to meet that need with what we've presented in the housing strategy until not just 2038, but beyond, until 2048, so 25 years into the future with what we've proposed. So we think that kind of demonstrates how well placed we are. We think it's a really innovative plan. Before this housing strategy, Kingston had put together the housing strategy that we were working on, and the then minister 20 years ago was Mary Delahunty. She actually presented our plan publicly and came and spoke about it here, saying how innovative Kingston was in this plan. And we really feel where we are now, again, now that we've gone 20 years on and back at this stage, we actually feel like this is another really good news story for the sector about how to bring in the density that you need, that the government probably would be really supportive of. We think that really aligns with what the state government's trying to do and what they've pushed out when they talk about the housing statement that they've released. We kind of welcome some of the changes that they've suggested that I think really support the crisis that we are in, and everyone recognises that we are in a crisis, and it does require a bit more an innovative approach. There's obviously some concerns. We need to see the details of some of the announcements to really work through. But one thing that they did announce was they identified 10 suburbs throughout Victoria that needed to take in over 60,000 homes, and one of those suburbs is in our area, is Moorabbin, which is also in my ward. So I represent the Moorabbin section in my ward, and we're actually doing a really, even without that being designated as one of the growth areas, we already had done a lot of the strategic work to set up Moorabbin as a growth area. And we've been working through that already with a lot of developments and developers to try to get really good outcomes. Like, we've negotiated good outcomes for social affordable housing options, and things like that. We had, we think appropriate development in the appropriate locations, so near activity centres and stations, and good active transport is really good, and that's what Moorabbin does. We had a 10-story application that had 0 objections, and that's very rare. And I think that kind of demonstrates that people recognise in the right spaces development like that is good.
Well, clearly you're doing something right there in terms of engaging with your community on those pretty complex and challenging issues. You mentioned Moorabbin, the airport, a crucial facility, obviously right in your municipality. You've been fairly vocal about the whole master planning process for that site, haven't you?
Yeah, so and another big piece of work that culminated this year as mayor, it's been a couple of years that we've been going on that process of the master plan. I mean, it's a good news story in the end to be honest, that we had really advocated to the minister, and to the credit of Catherine King, the federal minister. There'd been a lot of work to try to get the plan to be as supportive of the aviation industries and businesses in the space. And that was kind of what we were really doing, trying to represent not just the residents who abut the airport, Moorabbin Airport, but also we wanted to support aviation businesses. And that was why we had been so vocal about what the master plan was doing. And I think, and it seems like the federal government has recognised as well, that the process that we needed to undertake to do that it needs to be refreshed. It's flawed. It's kind of wrong that we don't get the opportunity to look at it. There's a lot of, it's an outdated act, and I'm glad to see that she's released the white and now the green paper on going through that process of reviewing the act and changing that. Because it does need a lot. We're really looking forward to making a submission on what we think would be really good changes. Ultimately, the Moorabbin Airport plan, the master plan that was finally adopted and accepted by the minister and approved, actually does protect the aviation businesses. So we're really happy to see that. It seems like most of our aviation tenants are really glad that that's the outcome that we took, and I'm glad that we were able to support them. And it wasn't just the tenants down at Moorabbin Airport. We also worked with the aviation industry across Australia and general airports to make sure that the airport remained an airport. We didn't want them to encroach onto the runway and then eventually choke out certain flights and planes that could run and operate. We still have a bit of work to do, and we'll continue to work with the organisation that operates and runs the airport about developments that they want to see in the space, which I guess they're entitled to, of course, but just to make sure that it's appropriate for where it abuts residential properties, which is the airport master plan didn't touch on, but there's room for us to kind of work in that space as long as we kind of have those conversations and that dialogue.
So that's all sounding much more positive than it was
We're
a few
pretty
months
happy.
ago. Yeah, and I'm sure in large part to the advocacy that you and your council have led there. Perhaps one more current issue on the flip side of things perhaps not going the way you want them to go. We've had a recent announcement about a local golf course being turned over for housing. You were pretty adamant that that should be retained as open space, weren't you? But is that lost now, that cause?
Look, it's an ongoing conversation for golf courses in general. The particular one you're talking about is Kingswood Golf Course, and that's been over close to a decade since that was purchased, and that conversation of turning that into development had occurred. We alongside our community and alongside other stakeholders were really interested on what happens on golf course lands, and I know some councils were paying mind to it too, because it was the first of its kind that then resulted in the state government releasing the golf course redevelopment guidelines. The minister did announce that would be rezoned, no longer special use golf course land. It would be a residential zoning, which we're disappointed with. That's the outcome, recognizing that they see that as space for future development. And we talked about our housing strategy, but the housing strategy we put out was actually, like I said, was able to meet the demand of housing needs without needing to reconsider golf course redevelopment. So we're upset that that's kind of where it landed, but we understand that's the minister's imperative and her decision, and she was able to make that decision. So now we're looking forward to the process that happens and to bring our community along that process to make sure the development and the application that goes through is community minded. We're one of the more densely saturated councils with the number of golf courses. We have over 10 now golf courses in Kingston.
Wow. Okay.
We're on the sand belt, so they're very nice golf courses. And we just want to ensure, and I know there's been a lot of conversations in the media about what happens to golf courses and the redevelopment, and other councils are going through a similar process. And we've got another ongoing one that we're discussing at the moment. It hasn't really reached any stages, but we know that that's something that they're considering. And we're now trying to work through that. We recently put up a motion to the MAV that was around advocating to the government to ensure that they could revisit the golf course redevelopment guidelines, because we think they do need to be revisited. And that got support on the floor. So we're going to continue having those conversations about it. But yes, it's been rezoned, and we'll see what the next steps are.
You can't win them all, as they say.
No.
Perhaps two more things before I let you go, Hardy. You're on the Local Government Ministers Advisory Panel this year. How valuable a forum has that been for you as a new mayor?
I found that really, really valuable. It was really good to actually provide insight into what's happening in the sector. I use that forum to actually speak to other mayors, neighbouring mayors, to try and get some of their ideas and thoughts about what's happening in their neck of the woods, and I could present that as part of what I see as ongoing problems in the sector. We really touched on a lot of governance related things, and there were some other key issues that were emerging in the sector that we had really good discussions with, and the minister was really Minister Horn was really receptive to having or listening to some of that feedback and those concerns, and it really gave us an idea of what local government in Victoria, the department, was interested in and what spaces they were thinking about. It was good as well to build those relationships and connections and understand what was happening in, regional and rural Werra Metropolitan Council, and I got a really good sense of what was happening for our regional and rural councils, and I've got some good relationships now with some of their councillors, not just the mayor in those spaces, and even their officers. We've had the chance to sort of connect. So, I mean, beyond just the networking part and meeting people, I felt like they did listen. Time will tell what that looks like now that they've got that feedback, and really looking forward to it. I do encourage people, who everyone's interested in actually applying for it. It's a really good avenue, I think, to actually share concerns at a higher level that you can directly meet with the Minister of Local Government to share.
Excellent. Well, of course, we're about to have a new crop of mayors, so that's a good message. Perhaps one more about you, Hardy. You mentioned software engineering's your background. You work as an IT project manager. How have you gone juggling that with being a mayor? Are you still working at the same time?
No, I gave work up to be a full-time mayor.
Right.
I wanted to do the job as properly as I could, and I felt like the best way that I could do that was to give myself completely to it. So now I guess I got to go on the job hunt if I'm not running contesting the next mayoralty. So I got to look forward to that. But
well,
I do love.
I was thinking your skills are very applicable at the moment, and I wondered what your thoughts on the emergence of AI technology is, because it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, isn't it?
It is. I actually was speaking to someone about AI recently when I was talking about the job hunt and what I would look at. So it is an emerging space. I got to do a bit more understanding on how it works in behind the scenes in the background. But I used to be really opposed to ChatGPT and things like that until I started using it, and I realized how good it can be just to set the skeleton frames, and then you mess with it and edit it. But it's good.
And it's a changing space. There's something new every week in that space. So good luck coming back up to speed and going on the job hunt, if that's what you're going to be doing in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris.
Hardy, it's been great to speak with you, and we've taken a big chunk of your time, and I know you're very busy as the mayor for another few weeks. So I want to congratulate you on the breath of fresh air that you've really brought to the role. And I reckon I can already see local governments in your blood, and you'll be hopefully around as a leading light in the sector for some time to come.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was lovely.
Nice to have you on the program. That's Councillor Hadi Saab, the Mayor of Kingston City Council, our guest today on Local Leaders from VLGA Connect.